AITA for refusing to be more modest around my stepson. I 35th met my husband 43 meters 8 years ago. We fell in love hard and got married a year later. My stepson was 6 years old at the time. I pretty much raised him, since his mother has always been out of the picture. And even though he does not call me mom, we have a great relationship. Ever since my stepson 14 meter hit puberty, my husband started commenting on my clothes and asking me to not wear a two-piece bikini around my stepson. He justified it by explaining that in his culture, he is from a Muslim Arab country, you should dress modestly around non-family members. I was very offended, since I consider him my son and I raised him since he was 6 years old. I dressed him, made him breakfast and took him to school every day. I read him bedtime stories and tucked him in bed. Last night I was online shopping while me and my husband were laying in bed. When I started browsing through bikinis, my husband asked me to not purchase any two-piece bikinis since it is inappropriate in his opinion. I went off on him and told him that he is the one being inappropriate and weird, and that his son is also my son. We argued for an hour and ended up leaving the house. He sent me a text later telling me that he is very upset with me for not respecting his culture and religion. Am I the asshole for refusing to be more modest? Info: my husband is not a Muslim. He left the religion 15 years ago. NTA: your husband is being weird and disgusting. While I completely agree with this, maybe have a talk with your son. He may have told his dad he was uncomfortable with how you dressed, not necessarily in a sexual tempted way, and it was blown out of proportion and made disturbing by your husband. It would also give you a good opening to talk to your son about how his thoughts and actions are not your responsibility to manage. It would not excuse your husband, but he may be trying to help his son and take the blame in the worst possible way. NTA: if he wanted someone from his culture, he should have married someone from his culture. It is so strange when people marry people not part of their culture and expect them to adhere to rules, customs they don't agree with. My BF is African in his culture. If we have kids, technically you're not supposed to announce the child's name until some sort of event. I've already told him I have no problem not putting the name of social media, but I am not going to deny my family the right to know the child's name. There are other things, but you get the drift. NTA: yes, my husband is Indian, raised in the US, and his mother acts like I am supposed to automatically know and abide by all their cultural norms. How about you adapt to the country you've lived in for 40 years instead of expecting someone from here who has never even visited your country to magically know all about your culture? Exactly. I personally love most things about my BF's culture. Like, well, I get 2 weddings. LOL. I don't always like the more women do this, men do that. I do respect what he prefers to adhere to, as that is his choice, but I don't need to do those things. For example, in his culture it is considered respectful to bow to his parents. Yes, really. Bow like the Queen of England. I didn't mind. I thought it was pretty cool. But I simply kept forgetting to do it, whoops. But my BF didn't get upset or anything. He understood that well. We don't bow in America. All good though. To each his own. Ever since my stepson 14 meter hit puberty, my husband started commenting on my clothes and asking me to not wear a two-piece bikini around my stepson. Dude, what? You have been in this kid's life for 8 years. He justified it by explaining that in his culture, he is from a Muslim Arab country, you should dress modestly around non-family members. Yeah, well, that is not your culture, and you have been part of his family for the better part of a decade. If he were planning on enforcing culturally based gender roles at home, that was a conversation he should have had with you a long time ago. Somehow, though, I do not think that is really the root of this. If it were, it would not have mattered how old the kid was, and this argument would have happened much sooner. When I started browsing through bikinis, my husband asked me to not purchase any two-piece bikinis since it is inappropriate in his opinion. For crying out loud. He sent me a text later telling me that he is very upset with me for not respecting his culture and religion. This is just flat out ridiculous. I'm sorry. He has been in a relationship with you for 8 years, and this is only now becoming a problem. He is springing this on you now that you are invested in his life. and his son's life completely out of nowhere. And it is completely unfair, thoroughly disrespectful of you, and incredibly inappropriate. If you are able to look past what a horse's sassy is being, though, and if this was not him playing the long game, waiting till you were an established part of the family before trying to mold you to his cultural expectations, maybe find out where the real problem is. If you love him and this is seriously out of character, then there might be something else to it. Refrain the discussion from me versus you to both of us versus the problem, and spend some time really figuring out what the problem actually is. But frankly, I think that is giving him more credit than he has earned here. NTA. I think the kid hitting puberty was the trigger, and I really think it says more about how the dad thinks male puberty works than anything else. Dad's really here thinking my son's now 14, and therefore has no self-control. Time to put temptation out of his way, because I cannot hold him responsible for his actions. It is so many layers of gross. NTA. I want to point out that your husband's use of the word modest to describe how he wants you to dress is a coded way of body shaming you. You are right to not permit it or to accommodate it. This actually is not about your son. It is about your husband's ridiculous belief that you are responsible for how boys and men respond to your appearance. His claim that his cultural beliefs need to be respected by you simply because he wants you to do it is total bullshit. Teach your son to respect women as human beings. It is creepy that your husband believes you are an object of temptation. To your son, I'm one to make sure I'm as sensitive as possible to other cultures. I see the need for it. I see how people of other cultures are treated by some people, and I think it is gross. That said, I grew up as a Christian in red state America. I'm not Christian anymore. If I moved to, let us say, India, I would not expect my spouse to adhere to rural American Christian morals. That would be super weird. A religion I no longer believe in, and a different country. Number NTA. Misogyny is multicultural and does not deserve sensitivity or respect. The Abrahamic religions all have some form of misogyny baked in, but the modern, extremist versions have gotten much worse. That is absolutely true. My point was on a different tangent, that it is weird to expect people to adhere to behavioral norms from another country and religion you do not even believe in. That is all, before we even look at the norm itself. Like, it would be weird to demand a Japanese person in Japan use a fork instead of chopsticks, or to expect a Hindu person to say Hail Marys, when it is something actively harmful like policing someone else's body. That is worse. But even if it was a benign thing, it would still be weird to enforce on people outside of that culture. LOLNTA. Hi. Person from Islamic background here. Tell your hubby he broke his own faith by marrying a non-Muslim who never converted and then living in the Western tradition. He does not get to go hide behind "it is my culture" when it suits him. If anything, he should be trying harder to respect your culture, since presumably you live in the West and those norms are the ones your stepson needs to be the most comfortable with. Another Islamic person here. OP is NTA. Husband is majorly tar. This is not the sort of thing you bring up 10 years into a marriage. He had no issue with OP's modesty before. You cannot arbitrarily use a culture card whenever you feel like it. Also seems her husband was not too attached to the culture to start with, so it seems he is just using it as a tool to get his way. Just as a heads up, in my experience, Arab and Indian cultures have very different attitudes to stepchildren and adopted children. The really strict followers or deeply cultural people may accept them into the household, but with dress code they are not considered mahram, meaning someone who was religious enough to wear hijab and follow the stricter rules would not remove their hijab in front of a stepson after a certain age, but could take off the hijab in front of a biological uncle. The difference has to do with marriage laws. If you divorce your husband, there is no law preventing you from marrying a stepson if he were of age. So even if everyone knows you don't feel that way, they still treat him as if he is not your biological son. NTA. But this isn't going to magically disappear. To me it is absolutely ridiculous. But these internalized beliefs can be really hard to beat. Even if the people who believe them admit it is illogical, they often stick to them for fear of looking bad to others. So, this is a really good point. But I think it is important to remember that OP is not the one with this religious restriction. If this was flipped, and she was saying to her husband, I love my stepson, but technically he is not merriment. Her husband was getting upset about her not considering him family. It would make sense to say, hey dude, this sucks. But it doesn't mean she doesn't love him as a son. It's just how the religious rule works. Because she is the one who gets to decide how and when she covers her body. In this situation, he is trying to impose the rule on her, and not even in a consistent way that actually follows the rule. It sounds like he has never previously had a problem with her wearing a bikini and being seen by unrelated strangers at the beach. I don't think she has any obligation to comply with that, even if he pretends it is somehow about his religion that he never previously took seriously. Yeah, I gotta say, one of the biggest problems I have with culture is people who pick and choose which dictates to treat like they are the most important thing in the world. Like this guy. So you were fine with ignoring culture when picking your wife, and no doubt enjoyed the beach with her, and I am assuming don't follow regular worship protocols if she is describing you as ex-Muslim. But hey, this cultural religious rule that limits my wife's freedom. Yeah, that one matters so much. Rolling my eyes right out of my head. Is not that the same for a lot of religious people? A Jewish person who does not eat kosher. They are picking and choosing. A Christian who is divorced or has tattoos. I do not agree with the husband, but it is rarely Christians who are looked down, questioned about not following all the rules of said religion. There are moderate Muslims out there who pick what they want to follow and what they do not. I would know. I used to be one. I would not, however, have forced my other half to follow my views back then. NTA, your husband is an ex-Muslim. He is not even a practicing Muslim anymore, and you aren't a Muslim at all. Therefore you don't need to adhere to any of their practices. Funny how his old beliefs become relevant to him when you decide to wear a bikini years after you get married. If he has never questioned your clothing before, I would dig a little deeper and figure out what is going on now, and see why all of a sudden he thinks it is okay to push his old religion on you. To me it seems like a convenient control tactic, or maybe outside forces influencing him. Figure out what is going on. But by all means, wear whatever you want and be proud of yourself. NTA, but setting aside the bikini issue, my red flag was when he said around non-family members. This to me is your biggest issue, and this is what would hurt me the most. Boys hitting teenage years will get excited looking at donuts, so the dad is probably concerned that his son will sexualize you, or he found out he already did, but that isn't on you. Continue to be you, there is no reason to change that. Don't be bullied, and tell your hubby to have a conversation with his son about the birds, the bees. NTA, unless you re-Muslim, those rules don't apply to you. Full stop. And even if you were, he is your child and your family by any metric. Your husband is being controlling and insecure. Does he not trust his son? Does he not trust you? Is there a reason you shouldn't trust him? He may be projecting, because that's really weird. NTA, if he is concerned about your clothing attracting inappropriate attention from his son, he needs to take that up with his son. It lines be a great lesson in boundaries, because men don't get to expect women to alter their wardrobes or behavior to cater to their feelings, and women are not responsible for managing the feelings or behavior of men. Period. When you tell girls to cover up so as not to distract boys, you ultimately send a message that boys' feelings and sexual urges are paramount and sacred, that girls' bodies are inherently sexual and exist primarily for men's consumption and pleasure, and that men should not be held accountable for their actions and cannot be expected to practice self-control. Dress codes teach men that the amount of attention or harassment a woman wants or deserves to receive is directly related to the amount of skin she shows, and that women who show skin are undeserving of respect and are inviting them to act on their sexual urges. Which is wrong. Clothing is not consent. It teaches men that they can weaponize their sexuality and use it to control women. And it teaches women that our bodies are shameful and not our own, and that in order to be respected and avoid becoming a victim of sexual violence, we have to hide ourselves away. It reinforces rape culture. It is misogynistic. It is oppressive. And it is a grossly irresponsible thing to teach your teenage son. Also, he is your partner, not your parent. And male supremacy isn't a religious or cultural tradition worth keeping. Is he also going to keep his son away from beaches, pools, water parks, fairs, public events in general, so that he does not encounter other people he considers immodestly dressed? All of those people are also not related to his son. Or is it just you that has suddenly become just a potential sex object instead of the person the boy probably fully regards as his mother, and in all likelihood is, and has been his primary caregiver? By the way, does he have a history of picking out other random stuff from his culture to suddenly obsess about? NTA. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.